These guys, HarvestMark, are OG traceability, as in old school gangster. I remember way back in the day when I co-founded Food Logic and I had a 10 by 10 booth at one of the food safety shows. Right next to me was Elliot Grant, the co-founder or the founder of HarvestMark. We're right next to each other, and there was all these other companies that do totally other things. We're the only traceability companies. This was like 2008. So before FISMA, before blockchain, like any of that stuff. And, the two of us are sitting there. No one's walking by. No one cares about traceability. We're like, maybe we should should rethink our business plans. But we got a chance to get to know each other at that time. So I've really enjoyed working with HarvestMark over the years. And so today, many years later, Todd Berg is going to show up and talk about the successful growth that HarvestMark has had, and talk about traceability, going all the way from the farm to fork, and it's now part of Trimble, so they have a much bigger footprint than they did back in the day in 2008 when we had our little 10 by 10 booth. So please welcome Todd Berg. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. It's good to see everybody. Come on in out of the aisles and have a seat. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about HarvestMark and Trimble's utilization of traceability and transparency technology. As Andy mentioned, one of the early pioneers of traceability in the fresh food and perishables industry. And I've been with the company since Elliot originally founded it about 10 years ago now. And then we were acquired by Trimble about 4 years ago. And now that really has expanded the set of tools that we have to offer, and applications and solutions for the full end-to-end supply chain. Just getting into a little bit of some of the key high-level trends that I think are driving so much interest in traceability in the last couple of years. It's really not just for an application, food safety issues and recall and investigation, but I think the opportunities for traceability and transparency are much bigger. One is the overall need for increasing operational efficiency. As we have a more and more global market, greater distribution of product across the globe, we really have a fairly poor supply chain management and quality management in the industry right now. And we've got our, definitely our challenges with regards to maintaining cold chain and shelf life. And overall, this leads to, issues when it comes to appropriate labor utilization and water, utilization. Why harvest this stuff? Why grow this stuff if ultimately 40% of it is getting wasted in the supply chain because it's, doesn't make it to the market fast enough and goes bad or gets tilled into the ground because the demand isn't there at the time. And this is why we see in the industry so much variation in perishable products. One day a case of grapes can be, $10, and the next day it can be $40. It's like, why? Because we don't have very good transparency through the supply chain and in demand to monitor that and project it. The next is just the continued desire for consumer transparency. And this is one of the core things that HarvestMark originally was founded on about 15 years ago, as Andy was speaking to. There's always been a need, but it continues to grow exponentially with millennials and the pervasiveness of the internet and mobility. Everyone wants wants data at their fingertips, and we've grown into a culture of a review-based culture where, when you go on shopping on Amazon, buy anything without reviewing it, understanding what feedback is, and people expect that level of transparency in their product, especially when we've got more global distribution. The product isn't grown as close by to where I live, but now in the middle of winter, I can get blueberries from South America, and I want to have greater transparency because I'm not connected to that agriculture area like I may have been in the past. Another is the proliferation of product claims. So, we've seen this emerge over the last decade or so and continue to grow. And as we again source food from more global locations, it becomes more challenging to be able to verify those claims. I think that smart marketers and branders have latched onto brands and claims and put them on their product because they know that it'll differentiate. But in reality, as companies that do the right thing to actually become organic or be fair trade and comply in earnest, they need to have a way to actually provide transparency and a way to verify those claims for the consumers to differentiate from imposters. Of course, then there's the food safety issues, and 2018 definitely was a record year for leafy green issues. FSMA's been in place for a number of years, is being rolled out as well into transportation logistics, the leafy green marketing agreement. All these things are in place, but there's more. There needs to be more with regards to the adoption of traceability and food safety practices to help ensure that we don't have these types of food safety issues and people getting sick or ill. And then, of course, emerging technologies. So obviously last year was when we kind of got the wave of blockchain hype, and we're starting to come into the area of reality and applications of the technology being driven by a number of leaders in the industry. We're also seeing AI, ML, and deep learning technologies being applied, where we're going to be able to use data to be able to predict shelf life, freshness, and quality of product through the supply chain as well as demand. And then also in the transportation logistics business, we're seeing development of autonomy, autonomous driving trucks, where those are full-time connected, provides greater transparency into the location, the state of the load and the truck, and overall without having an independent driver. So Trimble and HarvestMark offer a end-to-end set of traceability and food supply chain solutions. The way that we look at the supply chain end-to-end is as follows. HarvestMark in the division that I work in is focused on traceability and quality management across the end-to-end supply chain. So we have both traceability at the supply chain case level as well as then the consumer item level. So the ability to connect the consumer back to the farm, and as well as be able to associate any data from the supply chain, whether that be production data at the growing steps, shipment data, quality data, and transportation data, all can be associated and provided back into the supply chain for optimization, improvement in efficiency and quality, elimination of shrink and waste. We also have our Trimble Egg software, which is a leader in managing crop inputs and farm productivity, so that you can manage all your inputs from water, irrigation, seed, fertilizer, etc., to maximize the efficiency and profitability of the farm. And then Trimble is also a leader in the transportation logistics space, working with many of the leading carriers to be able to manage their assets and track them real time out in transit. We work with a number of different partners in the different ecosystems in the supply chain. This is not a full list, but we work with a company called iFood on food safety compliance and risk monitoring, basically digitizing your food safety SOPs, being able to track those real time rather than relying strictly on audits. We work with some cold chain partners in addition to the work we do at managing and tracking at the truck level, but folks like Emerson at the individual sensor level. And then all of this really depends on solving the problem at the end-to-end supply chain level. So that requires integrations with various other systems that are in the supply chain. Those might be ERP or warehouse management systems or other enterprise softwares. And we've done some good work in working with blockchain to ultimately utilize that technology to enable those systems, as well as Trimble systems, to be able to interoperate with the appropriate data, using blockchain as the secure backbone for sharing of that data. To dive a little bit deeper, we see the supply chain as being able to feed back into itself with traceability first and foremost. Having good traceability allows me to utilize that information through the supply chain, so that I can ultimately look at quality data through the supply chain and correlate it back to the origin and the cold chain to understand why did it, have issues, why did it go bad early and had to be shrunk out or wasted, as well as distribution data, and then ultimately consumer feedback. So being able to engage all the way to the end consumer and understand what their preferences are, what their desires are, what their satisfaction was, feeds back into itself, so that you can ultimately improve your full end-to-end supply chain. Driscoll's, as a customer, has utilized this platform to drive their research and development, and they have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of consumer feedbacks that allows them to slice and dice back to the variety, the genetic variety of berry that the consumer had, and then the location where they bought it, where it was harvested, which grower produced it, and that allows them to optimize those genetics, as well as their partnerships with growing partners in different growing regions and different areas. To drill in a little bit on Trimble's egg software, it's really an end-to-end system for managing farm productivity. So everything from demand planning, being able to lay out the different plots of land and define those, and be able to plan out the harvest rates you're going to need and production rates you're going to need at certain points in the year, and then be able to select those fields and allocate those resources to those fields, and then ultimately moving in once we're into production and being able to track all different activities out in the field. So issue work orders out to the field if there's a planting activity or fertilization or pesticide application, being able to track and dispatch those work orders out to workers in the field and track that they're actually doing them, so that they're in the right location, that they're actually doing the right job. Applying chemicals, irrigation, as well as scouting activities, being able to record where and exactly when pictures were taken out in the field, and recording information about the current state of the farm and the production activities out in the field. The importance of this in the association with traceability ultimately then comes through to harvest tracking, and enabling then not just tracking within the field, but once we harvest, be able to then track the performance of that product throughout the supply chain from the field ultimately all the way to the consumer. Because that's where HarvestMark comes in with processing and packaging. We have both case level PTI compliant traceability. So if you need to comply with your retailer food service requirements for PTI and case level traceability, we support all of those requirements and support all different workflows of product, whether that be shed packed, field packed, line packed, all different scenarios. And the difference between our traceability platform and a number of others is we're not just a labeling application, but all data gets also submitted into the cloud, so that we can then do analytics and reporting on production activities and do immediate trace back. And then in addition to this, with the ability of tracking pallet level traceability and shipments going out, we can track trace forward as well. So if you've got an issue with a particular lot, or a particular category of products, you can, within our reports and dashboards, you can filter down and identify the targeted lots and then where those all went to. We also provide centralized management of the GTINs, the item codes, and the label definitions. So if you're working with farms that have hundreds or thousand different plus locations, you can easily push out those GTIN updates and GTINs and label definitions out to those stations. As I spoke to, we also have traceability from the farm to the fork, so to the end consumer. And so here's an example of that implementation on an organic spring mix. So there's a QR code typically there that's utilized. So any smartphone that a consumer has can just open up their camera and scan that QR code, and it'll provide immediate transparency back to the origin of the product. Now that's great for food safety and investigations and recall, but hopefully that's not happening all the time. And so we also want to be able to connect to that consumer to be able to provide them greater, connection to where their food comes from, tell the multi-generational farm story. If it's an organic product, talk about the organic processes and certifications, and also provide a way for them to provide feedback back to the brand owner of their satisfaction with the product or purchase intents and general preferences for products. All of this is also cloud-based, so all the data is available in the cloud, and as I'll show you later, there's the ability to get some really powerful insights into where consumers are engaging with the products geographically, and how old the products are, and what type of trends we're seeing over time as far as consumer engagement. And we also have integration at this level with blockchain to be able to store item level traceability data in blockchain as well. Here's an example of that QR code, high level homepage for that product. And again, this is a unique code for that particular product, traced back to the farm, sharing any level of details that the brand really wants to share. So could be a verification of the authenticity of the product, the packing location, the fields that it came from, blocks, farms, and you actually have full control over what attributes of the harvest information, origin information are shared to the consumer, and which ones are just available for internal analysis and utilization in the within dashboards and reports. We also have a food safety component, which allows you to flag any products that are currently under investigation or recall, and also be able to correlate data from a food safety compliance perspective. And the feedback is completely customizable, so you can run different targeted survey questions to your consumers based on the product and the location that they're at, so that you can really do quick and cost-effective market research on their preferences. And then the platform's really open for all different types of recipes, nutritional information, or other custom content. It's really completely open from that perspective. On the distribution front, Trimble's a leader in transportation visibility and transparency. So once the product actually leaves a packing facility and say is on its way to a retail distribution center, we provide the platform for tracking the ETA of the departure and ETA of the delivery, tracking of the cold chain in transit, and if there's any alerts. We also provide enhanced weather monitoring and rerouting if there's issues with traffic issues, construction, weather issues, to most efficiently get the product from its origin to destination. Full proof of delivery, and also in addition to this visibility platform, also offers a full FSMA compliance assistance with tracking of what was in trailers and chain of custody of the product, and all those additional requirements that are being imposed on top of the transportation logistics industry for FSMA compliance. We also have a quality management platform that's used quite extensively by a number of retailers and food service companies here in the US as well as abroad. This helps standardize the QC process centrally and pushes it out to mobile devices in the distribution centers, but also gets used upstream at packing facilities or even farms, as well as downstream in retail stores. And the key here is that provides another data point that can be associated with the traceability information so that you can understand why are we getting different quality products from different fields back to the origin of it was a particular varietal or a particular growing method or a particular weather in that growing region that resulted in perhaps moldy berries or decay, premature decay. So all of that can be associated while also providing individual value and being able to understand either farm or supplier compliance and their overall quality. So with this platform, it can track quality data over time and do supplier or category or farm comparisons of the quality. And then lastly, to close the loop, connecting all the way to the consumer, you saw the consumer trace page example. This drives some really powerful analytics and the ability to be able to connect to the consumer to see where consumers are interfacing with the product. The color coding on that map is the location and also the age of the product from the point of origin harvest to the trace itself, and be able to identify trace trends over time and be able to compare different SKUs or other elements, average age versus other products that might be flowing through the supply chain, because we see a lot of different variation based on the location or based on the retail banner that it's sold to, and how efficiently those products are flowing into those locations and ultimately to the consumers. And then being able to monitor consumer satisfaction, understand if there's any high level issues and satisfactions with the product, as well as drill into individual voice of the customer type feedback on specific questions that you might want to quickly and easily source from the end consumer. Provides a great transparency to the consumer, makes them feel like they're connected to your brand, and can be done very, very cost effectively compared to other methods, panels and those types of things. This is very easy and effective to and real time to be able to implement. So just a summary of benefits. Trimble really offers, I believe, the most comprehensive kind of integrated set of offerings across the full supply chain. It's all enabled through item and case level traceability, but then as your specific needs, depending on what step in the supply chain you are, it can be anything from grower shipper type solutions to retail, food service, producer, all the way to the consumer. So really, it's a number of different ways to interface with the platform and benefit from it. Whether it's a very vertical solution or whether it's end to end from the farm all the way to the consumer. So with that, I think we might have time for a few questions.
I come from a part of the world that is struggling with traceability. To what extent can you install the infrastructure for your programs in other parts of the world? And would that need special agreements on intellectual property or on related solutions?
So first and foremost, the platform is cloud-based. So the infrastructure from a computational perspective is hosted in the cloud and can be accessed from anywhere. And most of the data is submitted via browser or mobile applications that we've developed. So submission of the data, and these are typically readily available, consumer type products, although we do run on a number of enterprise level devices as well. As far as data privacy and protection, we do have that ability to control at a very granular level, at the actual attribute level, what data is private to your organization, shared to other organizations within the supply chain, or ultimately public, meaning that it's fully available to anyone who traces that code, even a consumer at the end of the supply chain.
And Todd, what countries does Trimble provide support for their hardware and software and services and so forth?
Yeah, Trimble's a global company, so we're in every country, I think, virtually. HarvestMark primarily does business in the Americas. We're strong in North America, Canada, Mexico, and all of Latin and South America, as well as Australia and New Zealand, and a little bit of business in Europe, but primarily in the Americas and Australia and New Zealand. But Trimble overall has a global footprint.
If I may ask again, the intellectual property component from your corporate perspective to your distributors or agents on the ground, are you addressing global infrastructures that need governance and WIPO protection for your applications to be implemented in other parts of the world other than Australia and the developing parts of the world?
Yeah. So it's always been our position that the data is owned by our customers. So
it's not the data, your value chain. Not the customer's data, but your intellectual property, so that you can support your cloud-based solutions overseas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So what was the question?
If when I buy my Oracle solutions,
yeah,
they support their on-the-ground applications because they have offices overseas,
yes,
and addressing their intellectual property to the clients that they're selling their software. My question is to you: how does HarvestMark address these components overseas?
Yes, yeah. So Trimble has offices throughout the world, as well as a deep reseller network, which are also certified on HarvestMark for local support. Yep.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for that. Can you comment a bit on what customer response rates are like in terms of market data one producer might get?
Yep.
And general, what is the consumer attitude toward it? You know, many people say, why should I even care? I'm just wondering.
Yep. It's going to depend a lot on the implementation of the traceability elements and the call to action. But I always say, we're going to probably see a fraction of a percent, response rate. But that, when you look at it, if typically in this industry we're shipping millions or hundreds of thousands of units, that still results to really substantial data, and you can really get important insights into consumer preference from that. For example, Driscoll's runs a very successful, they call it their Delight program, where you don't just trace the code once, but you actually join their panel. You become part of that Delight. It's kind of their fan club. They give some coupons based on the number of feedbacks you've provided, and then give some weekly email updates and things like that. So that becomes a very sticky program for them that works very well and solicits fairly high percentage of consumer responses. The feedback, when you survey someone on their interest in this transparency, market research always shows very high, like 70-80% would buy a product that has this transparency over one that doesn't. I think we're beginning to see people actually back that up with their wallets, and starting to see, I know that Driscoll's, for example, has been able to establish, for a number of reasons, but the traceability elements and the quality and the genetics they've been able to develop, in part through this platform, a 25% price premium in the market in general. So, they can definitely command a higher price than other, berry growers in the industry through that differentiated brand that they've developed, which is both, marketing of the brand, but also backing that up with, high quality product, superior genetics, and optimal, growing techniques. So.
Just another question. I noticed you do provide, does the producer see that geographic scan data? And is there further metadata available, like time of day scan, to maybe detect shopping patterns or preference patterns?
Yeah, there's a deep set of data that can be visualized. And so we work with our customers to be able to create dashboards that meet your specific requirements. And so, yeah, we know exact date, time, millisecond when that trace happened, typically the location. We also can correlate that to a store's database, retail store database that's in the system. So in a lot of cases, we can identify if they were in a store or at home at the time of trace.